Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to the Graphic Design is Fun podcast. My name's Dan. Today we're chatting with Sean Wolcott, graphic designer and founder of Rationale, a design studio in Seattle, Washington. Before starting his studio, Sean was a designer for some of the world's biggest companies, including Amazon and Microsoft, where he worked as a creative director. Sean is a really fascinating guy. On top of running his design studio, he also runs a music production studio called Soundview Analog, which we talk about. He's also met like every design legend. I mean, it's crazy. Tom Geismar, Burton Kramer, Ellen McFadden, Milton Glaser, and Massimo Vignelli, who Massimo actually sort of became somewhat of a mentor to Sean and a friend, which was really cool to hear about. You know, that friendship and how that came to be. We had a lot of fun chatting. Sean's a great guy. I've been following his work for a really long time. If you want to check out his work in his studio, there will be links in the show notes as well as everything else that's mentioned throughout the episode. And yeah, without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Sean Wolcott.
Obviously, there was sort of a golden era of corporate identity design,
Yeah.
sort of in the 60s and 70s. But yeah, nowadays.
Yeah, I feel like it's still solid. I feel like Canada still kind of punches above its weight in terms of graphic design. In terms of what I see, I'm biased, but just walking around the city, I see like some newer logos. Like even just yesterday, I remember noticing two. One of them is the Canadian Blood Services, like to donate blood. That's like a new identity from the past couple years that I think is really, really solid, and their website and everything is beautifully done. And another one is Bulk Barn. They sell like bulk foods. Um, and they had like a kind of minimal sort of Helvetica all lowercase logo, and they didn't change it much, but now it's like a nice bulky thick type, which like matches the idea of bulk barn to me much better. um anyway, those are just two that I saw literally yesterday walking down the street, and I thought like this is solid.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I think I was born in the Seattle area. I've always, lived in America, but yeah, just with some other countries. I mean, outside of America. I mean, not everyone, but there's definitely sort of a kind of more inherent cultural appreciation for like everyday design. And obviously in like Scandinavia, places like that,
Yeah.
definitely. But I mean, I don't know. Meanwhile, in times where I was like in Amsterdam talking to the designer Wim Crowell, who was one of the founders of a place called Total Design in the 50s. I was sort of impressed with kind of the everyday, things being generally better than America, and he was sort of, complaining about it. So I guess to a certain degree, it's all relative.
Yeah.
But I think, I think something that happens, a lot in kind of the sort of marketing-led, approach in corporations in America is sort of everything is sort of instant and immediate, and therefore everything is sort of equally disposable. So you have, things change, quickly, especially on like digital platforms and things where you don't have to, spend $20 million in signage changes.
Right.
And Yeah, that's good, but also sort of like the notion of, what's timeless is important and can get lost as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point where like more and more things are digital. There's not as much of a high cost to like rebrand if you don't have like physical locations everywhere, and that maybe leads to like less care and like less need for like something to be timeless.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, sort of, a logo, like a design system, should be flexible and something that can adapt. Uh, and but meanwhile, we're at kind of a place culturally where just the average person discourse on like design and a logo change becomes like a culturally broad topic, which is great
Yeah.
in terms of like how design has progressed.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, it sort of is like a little ridiculous, too. It's just just design, it's just a logo, you know.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. Like I see a lot of I guess like discourse, but it's like young people and it's like memes and things on Twitter and stuff about like rebrands. And it's actually it's I mean it's cool to see that like people who are not graphic designers or in the graphic design world still have like very strong opinions, but a lot of it, or like a lot of the thinking is just like, oh, like why do they have to simplify everything? Everything's simpler, we're losing all this like fun charm. And that's like received negatively, definitely, at least at first. Do you see that, those kinds of like comments a lot? I feel like that's a common
Yeah,
notion.
I mean, I generally sort of like don't, I mean, I really don't read any like online design stuff, or I mean online in general. And sort of my discourse with design is like a uh my own dialogue of just the work and like reacting to the work, and seeing things and being inspired by things, and sort of always trying to pursue something that is about sort of finding the refinement of an idea. I think a lot of times, there was so much great sort of like corporate identity design and like visual design, and sort of what happened kind of post World War II, that sort of the idea of not just visual arts but graphic design came unto its own. But I think on the other hand, a lot of what happened became sort of crystallized too soon and became, sort of fetishized. So, when I think of simplicity, or, using a grid, or sort of restrained elements for doing design, it's not some like, it's not a religious doctrine. It's not some like fetish. It's just a, uh, pursuit of something that, that is all about context and how you execute it. But generally, for an organization, I think fewer things done with finesse, always resonates than sort of a lot of things done without finesse.
Yeah,
And particularly for companies, and large teams, having things that are done in a way that have a level of clarity is not just a good thing to have, but it's a necessary thing to have in terms of uh, making things consistently with a group of people. But back to the previous note, in terms of the sort of online dialogue and things changing, I think what could be meaningful criticism, is actually more just kind of a uh, sort of reactions. It's all about reactions. It's all about outrage, and sort of meaningful discourse is sort of missing, and it sort of is a upvote downvote, and the nuance of the situation is just completely absent, at least in such places that traffic and such things,
for sure.
which from my standpoint, yeah, any kind of design criticism in that sense tends to be more reactionaryism than actual meaningful critique.
Yeah, no, totally. I Going back to the idea of fetishizing, I'm curious, like, have you seen the documentary Design Canada?
I did, yeah. A friend of mine, Greg Durrell, yeah, he directed it. My son and I actually went up to the premiere
Oh,
a
cool.
few years ago up in Vancouver, Canada, when they were doing that. Yeah, it's definitely cool. What'd you think of it?
Oh, I mean, I love it. I remember seeing that documentary when it came out, and I was just finishing school, and I mean, it's just super inspiring, and just to see how like that there's like a real love and a real passion for this stuff in Canada, like in my own country. I just thought it was amazing, and I got the poster for it and everything. Um, but I remember coming across a critique one time that was very very like thoughtful and well written. That was just sort of saying it's a beautiful documentary, but maybe we're like overly fetishizing or like overly focusing on kind of this like you were saying, like the 50s and 60s era design. um and I didn't know what to make of it. Is there anything bad about that? Like
Yeah,
what do you make of that?
yeah. Yeah, no, I think a lot about that stuff. I think inevitably uh, there's trends, and trends will sort of push things up, that sort of have a resonance with timelessness, and things that come up that are maybe less timeless. And I guess things that are timely versus timeless have their place. Um, but kind of in terms of sort of obsessing over kind of an era and thing, I mean, definitely for me, from a design standpoint, I can look at sort of, yeah, design from the sort of 40s to 70s and just find kind of endless inspiration,
Yeah,
just
same.
in terms of the formally, I think just the typography and the use of kind of space and tension and using sort of gestalt principles of design. I mean, I think it's unheralded, so if there's a bar, why not keep looking at that bar and trying to match or exceed that bar. But I think the problem is when people sort of look at it from a one-sided standpoint, that it's only about Helvetica, that it's only about this thing and that. And that's when sort of a spirit of finding clarity in design gets replaced with something that's a dogma, and that's really what, not what design's about. But I mean, meanwhile, we can look back in other cultures and see sort of, clarity in design concepts, particularly like, yeah, 16th, 17th century Japan. You look at the mon, the family symbols and crests, or patterns and tapestries that were done. I mean, they rival the best sort of, yeah, logo modernism from from the last century. So yeah, so I think these ideas have sort of constantly run through humanity, the kind of pursuit of abstraction to convey a complex idea. I think that's really what's at a lot of these things, more so, even back to like cave paintings. I don't, the fact that cave paintings were simple, I don't think it was that people hadn't figured out how to draw things complexly yet. I think there's just a universality to ideas that are sort of distilled, and then our brains just are sort of geared to see abstract concepts and interpret them. And I think obviously, faces. We look at the moon, we see a face, and then yeah. Meanwhile, here basically with AI and things like that, we have the notion of tools like Dolly and things like that, which is kind of a whole nother frontier that actually doesn't make me fear for my job at all, to be honest. That's a separate discussion. But the point I was going to make, though, is that those tools actually are very good at interpreting abstraction, and less so much with kind of more literal concepts too, which is maybe related or not, but just kind of fascinating on its own.
If we can go back a little bit and talk about your your career and as a graphic designer, you mentioned kind of having an aha moment that you describe in your book as a personal illumination on the power, purity, and clarity of design. What was that sort of moment, that kind of enlightenment, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I this was always sort of visually geared, and just as a kid, that's all I really did was like play with Legos and draw. That was like my two main obsessions. And in a way, yeah, design is sort of playing with Legos. But yeah, but anyways, I was also interested from an early age with like the notion of just of technology and like visual arts. So and yeah, in the 80s, my parents bought a computer called a Commodore 64, and yeah, very kind of quickly I was figuring out how to like sort of draw or like paint things in there. And when I was in ninth grade, which would have been 19 or maybe eighth grade, yeah, 1990, 1991, an art teacher of mine had a color Macintosh with a color printer, and that, I mean, it seems ridiculous to say now, but that was like something you've never, that was like finding a unicorn in the wild. So he had done some like digital art and like had this done, printed it out in his color printer. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So really kind of, that sort of enticed me. And then basically from kind of around that same age, started playing music. And then yeah, inevitably was essentially like making design for like cassette covers and things like that for music, and sort of doing graphic design without realizing it.
Yeah.
And ended up sort of getting pointed out that I was doing design by a high school teacher, and sort of went off on my way. But generally, though, just kind of as great as the computer is as a tool, it sort of opened up sort of infinite possibilities for everyone, which kind of made a lot of things that are very much not, clarity from a design standpoint. Um, and I'm not, necessarily against those things. It's art is art and design is design, and there's definitely overlap. But seeing, Swiss design, and like particularly stumbling across like Massimo Vignelli's work, just made a big impact on me, just in terms of like the visual power, and kind of the way it spoke to me was just really powerful.
Yeah, and then so you discover Massimo Vignelli's work, and then fast forward at some point, you guys are like friends, and you're working with him. He's sort of a mentor, and I mean, how did that? Which, first of all, I mean that's incredible that you got to spend time with him. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a crazy thing where, I mean, I remember the moment of discovering his work, and kind of like just way back, just uh over 20 years ago, to sort of seeing that and just thinking like, wow, like this is crazy. Where is this guy? I want to like learn from this. And sort of, life proceeds forward. But there was a point in the sort of late 2000s where I think it was actually after the Helvetica documentary came out, sort of he was in there being interviewed. It's like, that's the guy. Wow. And soon after, I just kind of had this sort of urge that like, hey, this guy's, approaching like 80. How long is this guy going to be around for? And turned out that the place called the Vignelli Institute for Design Studies had just opened in Rochester, New York, at the RIT, the institute out there. And they were doing a design workshop that summer. So basically, it's like, all right, I'm all in. I gotta go to this thing. And sort of did some side gigs to sort of make up the cash for it, and went out there. And just to sort of meet him, was awesome. Just to sort of see his thought process in person was because a few years before that, he published a book called the Vignelli Canon that had a big influence on me, just in terms of just kind of the clarity he had in thinking about design. Sort of demystified a lot of things for me, and made things just very understandable in a way that nothing had for me previous. But anyways, at this RIT workshop, it was just I don't know, it felt like, it's sort of a cliche, but it felt like the sort of kung fu scene from like The Matrix, where all this information was just coming at me, and just kind of opened up my mind in a way that just
Yeah.
reading a book couldn't. Just being with him and hanging out with him and other students. But I showed him some of my design work, and he was impressed. So that obviously was awesome to get a praise from somebody who's one of your design heroes. And then he's like, you're pretty good. Where'd you learn? And I said, well, just from looking at your stuff, and reading, and just kind of figuring it out on my own, because I'm basically a community college dropout, just to start doing design on my own. And Massimo said, he said, you're like me, a passion's the greatest teacher. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
That's amazing. Such a beautiful quote too. Like that's such a nice way of saying it. Wow. Okay, so So you did go to school. You went to college and you dropped out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, I just the music and design, which kind of are my perpetual, undying, passionate interests. Yeah, both of them, I just started doing them because I like doing them. And I didn't have a formal education, but on the other hand, I do them every day, both of them, and I've had a good chance to sort of, meet and pursue different people in both of those fields that sort of are my college. So the fact, I was lucky enough to sort of have Massimo as my college education versus
Yeah,
wherever else
seriously.
is yeah, something I definitely don't take for granted.
Yeah, totally. Okay, and then so going from there, currently you run your own studio, Rationale, but at some point in between there, you're working other jobs, work at Microsoft for a while, work at Amazon. So what was that trajectory? You did you want to open your own studio, or was that not really on your radar at the time, like when you were at Microsoft?
No, it was very much on my radar. It's just sort of making the leap is kind of a big, scary thing. And it's definitely something that yeah, Massimo like encouraged me to do. Uh, yeah, I think yeah, behind me I have a little frame note from him
Oh
on
yeah, yeah, I've seen that. That's
or
amazing.
this was when I was at Microsoft and just sort of so he sort of encouraged me to do it. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, but just sort of the having sort of young kids and taking care of a family, it's sort of is a scary jump. But meanwhile, the corporate world, and previously the sort of larger agency world before that, I mean, they gave me a lot of experience that I'm able to apply here at Rationale now. So I wouldn't erase those experiences, but on the other hand, there was definitely a point where I just that was really kind of the only choice, is just to do something kind of more independent, where it's about sort of pursuing kind of my own design voice in a way that serves clients' needs versus sort of building up, Microsoft's design system, et cetera. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I got, to do things that sort of had global reach, is something I was able to sort of apply the teachings from Massimo into that space, and yeah, kind of gave me a platform, for things I do now and
Hmm.
moving forward. But yeah, it was the kind of thing where basically because Rationale I've been doing for over 10 years now. But for the first few years, it was kind of on the sidelines before I just kind of jumped in
Yeah.
as like a full time effort. So
How's that going? How's Rationale these days? It's two of you, right?
yeah, I mean, actually it's three of us
Oh, okay.
currently. And then we've got, some other designers that come in, here and there, but having done lots of kind of bigger projects and like managing larger teams, like basically the bigger the team, the less like you are designing and just sort of pointing and giving feedback on things. So
Right.
yeah, so basically, yeah, we're here north of Seattle. I've got two full-time designers, one that's here and one that's offsite in Italy. Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where we like to keep it sort of small, just to sort of be selective in the work we do. But on the other hand, we're fortunate with kind of the recommendations we've received, and the type of projects that are come our way to do, sort of big things for big clients that we feel like, sort of have a mutual interest in, our ability to kind of apply what we're good at and something that they appreciate, and yeah, can take and help for their own needs.
Nice. And so you're running Rationale, and then also you're like you mentioned music earlier, but that's like not sort of just a hobby. Like you have like a studio, and you like are doing client work with your music. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, so it's sort of, they're like dueling. I mean, they're sort of dueling careers. They're definitely like both full-time jobs in a way,
Right.
but I think for me, it's more about the things I care about and I'm good at, as things that, can pay the bills, versus design or music. It ends up being any given week ends up being sort of a mixture of both of those things. So yeah, it's fun. I like it, and I think yeah, sort of the sonic versus the visual kind of has a creative shift that kind of helps each other out in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I was looking through your website and your, and Instagram and stuff, and I was seeing all this music stuff, and I'm like, dang, this is like cool. This is kind of badass. Like like a full-on musician. You got a cool studio. Yeah, it's pretty sick. And I mean, just cool that you're able to kind of pursue both of these, sort of two different passions, but still pursue both of them so fully. Is like that's awesome.
Yeah, I think I mean there's only so many hours in the day, but I think for me personally, yeah, sort of having kind of a project that comes along that tends to be kind of more intensive on the music side, and another one that comes along from the other end is nice. And inevitably, my like music clients ask for like cover art,
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Yeah.
and actually more and more like design clients are beginning to ask for music.
Oh,
So
really?
uh, yeah, so that's sort of becoming a thing a little bit as well,
That's cool.
which is interesting. But yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, on the music side, that sort of has definitely ramped up, a lot more in the last couple of years. Got to work on a movie over the last year that just premiered at the Venice and Toronto Film Festival, actually.
Oh, cool.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of a space I've wanted to get into for a while, and was able to do that from essentially start to finish, all the way through like shooting the film and post production. And that's called Dream and Wild. Yeah, I don't know. I'd get bored if I was just doing one or the other.
Right. That's cool. And so for the movie, did you do like design or graphics or like titles or anything like that?
No, I mean no, but I think for the right client in the future, I'd love to do
Hmm.
some title design and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I think particularly with the movie industry, uh, things tend to be kind of very siloed. So like there's like Rationale is sort of we do it all if it's in the sort of vein of communication, that we feel we're good at. Whereas in the film industry, there's sort of like we're a title design shop, and they
Right.
just do title design, and that's it. Whereas with Rationale, it's like we do title design, we do packages, we do magazines, we do websites, we do applications. It really doesn't album covers. It doesn't necessarily limit itself to kind of one genre, if you will.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of a little less opportunity in that realm, kind of in how that industry is structured. But it's yeah, so it's not anything we're chasing right now, but would happily take on. And I've always been a sort of big film buff, and can bring a lot to that if the right client came along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and in that sense too, with Rationale, like all of our work has only just pretty much only exclusively been word of mouth. So yeah, we're trying to get better about updating our website. I think it's like 4 years behind right now, save for two projects we put on in the last few months, and that could be perceived as a dormant design studio, but it's actually every year has been busier than the last. So yeah, it's very much the opposite.
Well, hey, I mean, if it's working, then
Yeah, and I think sort of to use an analogy too, I've always been more comfortable as a architect and a builder than a real estate agent, if you will. So in that sense, sort of fortunately, we good. I mean, as Massimo said to me, sort of yeah, good client will lead to better clients, and a bad client will lead to worse clients, and that seems like a yeah, it sort of seems like a gross simplification, but it's definitely been true
Yeah.
in the work we've done.
Actually, well, one thing I will say, I remember this, and I just wanted to mention it. Like I have like a bookmark folder, in my browser, and I'll save websites or like people's portfolios or agencies that I come across, and I think Rationale was the first one where I was like, this is really cool. I have to save this, and I'll can reference it later and learn from it, because I remember just being like, okay, this shit is cool. Also, I was like, dang. And now I'm annoyed that this name is taken, because if ever I wanted to start a studio, I would want to call it Rationale. It's such a perfect name.
Yeah, it's thank you. Um, yeah, in terms of the name, it was just a name that just sort of arrived out of nowhere and just made a lot of sense. I think even back then there was sort of a skincare line and maybe a rapper with
Oh
the
yeah.
same name. But yeah, no, it describes what we do, where it's not just about sort of rationale in like a in the left brain sense, but I think everything we do we are sort of hyper thoughtful about, and I think that that just makes the work richer. So and as you know as well as I do, that to do like a simple thing well is way harder than just whatever middle of the road solution. Yeah, so we try to do work that yeah really kind of resonates, and I think fortunately with something like design, it's that if you encounter it and it's kind of speaks to you, it will do so instantly, be that another designer or a client or whatever. So yeah, so I think in that sense it's great to hear those stories of the people that have sort of found out about us, Pinterest diving or whatever over the years, or people I've met, that I guess we've sort of done it long enough now that there'll be people I'll meet that are sort of like, oh yeah, I used to always look at your stuff in college or whatever like that. So happy to yeah basically pay it pay it forward in the
Yeah.
way that our mentors have done so for us.
That's wonderful. Well, Sean, thanks so much for chatting. This was super fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really good to meet you, and happy to do it. And yeah, we should stay in touch.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode of the Graphic Design is Fun podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps others find the show, so it would be very much appreciated. If you have any feedback, any suggestions, or just want to say hello, you can shoot me a message at Dan Allen Studio on Instagram or Twitter. If you love the podcast, if you hate the podcast, whatever you got, I would love to hear it. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.